It was 6:37 a.m. on a Thursday when my dad's name popped up on my phone. I wasn't expecting anything important, just catching up on emails for the construction equipment company I ran. The screen lit up, showing dad's number, and I groaned. I wasn't in the mood. "Get over here. We need to talk," he said, his voice flat. That tone, calm but with a hint of control, was the one he used when he had family rules to lay down. The kind that never really felt like suggestions, just demands. "Okay, Dad, I'll be there soon," I said, my stomach already flipping. I drove to the house I grew up in, the place that never quite felt like home anymore. My mind spun, wondering what this was about. A problem with the equipment? Something about my brother Ryan? But when I pulled up, the air seemed thicker than usual, like something heavy was hanging in the air waiting to drop. They were all waiting for me in the living room. Dad, Mom, and Ryan. They were sitting there like they were about to break the news about a death in the family, but the look on their faces was worse. "We've called off the engagement party," Mom said first. My heart skipped. "What?" I didn't have to ask, but I did anyway. Dad spoke again, this time with more finality. "It's over the top, not practical. You don't need all that." I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. 3 weeks before my engagement party, after I'd already paid everything, made all the arrangements, and they just decided without even asking that it was too much. But it didn't stop there. They didn't just call off the party. They didn't approve of Eric either. "He's not going anywhere in life," Dad added, as if it was a fact, not an opinion. I could feel my jaw tightening, but I stayed silent. What was the point in arguing with them? The words burned in my throat, but I swallowed them down. I just wanted to get out of there. Ryan threw in his 2 cents, like he always did. "A used truck and a backyard mechanic job? What are you even thinking?" I didn't respond. I didn't owe them an explanation. And then Mom, with that ever-persistent concern in her voice, added, "You should aim higher. Find someone who can give you a better life." A better life. They didn't even understand what I'd built, what I'd worked for, but I knew better than to try and explain it to them now. I stood up, my chair scraping the hardwood. "Understood," I said, the words tasting bitter as they left my mouth. Without saying anything else, I walked out, shutting the door behind me and leaving them in their well-meaning ignorance. I didn't look back. I barely made it to the door when Mom's voice stopped me. "We called the restaurant, the decorator, and the band," she said, her words clipped like she was waiting for me to be grateful. "We canceled everything, all of it." The weight of her words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It wasn't just that they'd called it off. It was the finality in her voice that made it clear they'd been planning this for a while, without even bothering to ask how I felt. "They're wasting money," Dad added, his eyes steady, unblinking. $18,000, gone. I could hear Ryan in the background, shuffling his feet, probably itching to get his 2 cents in. He always did. "It's not like you can't afford it," he muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But you really think Eric's the kind of guy who'd know how to handle something like that?" I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. I could already feel the venom in his words, even without seeing his face. He was always quick to criticize Eric, to tear him down for not fitting into whatever mold my family had decided was acceptable. "Used truck. Backyard mechanic," Ryan went on, shaking his head like the world had ended. "Seriously? That's who you're marrying?" I clenched my fists at my sides, letting the words roll off me like rain. I wasn't going to engage, wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Let him think he'd won. "Eric's fine," I said, my voice low but firm. I didn't need to explain. They wouldn't understand. They never did. Mom ignored my answer, choosing instead to double down on her advice. "You should aim higher, honey," she said, her tone soft but edged with judgment. "Find someone who can give you a better life." A better life. The word stung, but I refused to let her see it. What did she know about my life, about what I wanted? The life I'd built from the ground up, brick by brick, while they laughed behind my back for working too many hours. What did she know about the satisfaction of being in control, of making decisions that mattered, of actually having something to show for the long nights and early mornings? "Mom, But she cut me off, already moving into the next well-meaning but toxic suggestion. "I'm just saying, you deserve better. You deserve someone who's going places, who can take care of you." I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't listen to the same tired lines, the same tired judgment. I was done. Understood, I said, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. It was all I could say, all I wanted to say before I walked out the door and left them to their delusions. I turned on my heel and left the house, the door shutting with a soft click behind me. The weight of their words still hung in the air, but I didn't care. They didn't understand. They never had, and at this point, I wasn't sure they ever would. I didn't bother driving back to my tiny townhouse. I went straight to my office. The sleek, cold glass walls of the building still had the same sterile feel, but today it felt oddly comforting. I pushed the door open, my heels clicking on the polished floor, and went straight to the kitchen to grab a cup of coffee. My fingers were a little shaky, but I ignored it. I needed to focus. I'd let myself feel the hit for about a minute, just long enough to let the disappointment settle in my chest. But now it was time to do something. I pulled out my phone and dialed my assistant's number. It rang twice before she picked up. "Hey, can you pull up the reservation details for the venue?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though I could hear the tightness in my own voice. "Sure thing," she said, tapping away on her keyboard. There was a brief pause before she spoke again. "It's for the lakeside event space, right?" "Yeah, that's the one." Another pause. Then she spoke, a little more slowly this time. "I'm seeing some canceled bookings under the event's name, but this doesn't match up with your usual admin login, I can tell you that." My stomach twisted, but I kept my tone even. "What do you mean?" "It looks like someone accessed the reservation system under a different account, maybe from the back end. They changed the dates, canceled everything you had scheduled, and it doesn't seem like any of your usual staff was involved." I sat down at my desk, the sharp edge of the chair biting into my legs. They thought they'd taken everything from me, that they'd control the situation by canceling my engagement party, but what they didn't know was that I had every single piece of the puzzle in my hands. "Thanks. Keep an eye on this. I'll call you back later." I ended the call and dialed my legal advisor's number. It rang, and I let it play out until he picked up. "Hey, I need your help with something," I said. "Of course," he replied. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to grin. "Someone tried to cancel one of my bookings under false pretenses. I need to know what to do when someone fraudulently cancels a contract at one of our locations." He was silent for a moment, then spoke with a little more concern. "Who's behind this? It doesn't sound like an accident." I leaned back in my chair, tapping my fingers against the armrest. "My family?" His silence stretched longer this time, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head. "Okay, we can make this right, but you have full control over the property, correct?" "Absolutely," I said, my voice flat. I had built everything, down to the last contract. I wasn't going to let them take anything from me, especially not now. After a few more minutes of details, I hung up, a quiet confidence settling over me. I had full control over every aspect of that venue, every reservation, every contract. The family thought they were canceling my event, but they weren't. They were just canceling a fake one. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness of it grounding me. There was no anger anymore, no frustration, just a calm, cold certainty that this was over. I set my cup down and made a decision. My family wasn't getting away with this, not this time. They'd crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let them pretend they could call the shots in my life. I was done playing by their rules. They had no idea who they were really messing with. I'd barely settled back into my chair when my phone buzzed again. It was Dad. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, thinking about letting it go to voicemail. But I knew he wouldn't stop. Not yet. Not until he had some sort of grip on this mess they'd made. So I picked up. "What now?" I asked, my voice flat. "Why won't they give us a refund?" Dad's voice was tight, like he was barely holding it together. "The venue's being impossible. This is your event, right? You're supposed to fix this." I could hear the panic under his words, but I didn't feel a bit of it. They had no idea who they were talking to. "I can't do anything about it, Dad," I said, taking a slow sip of my coffee, feeling the warmth roll through me. "The owner won't budge." I could hear him pacing in the background, muttering under his breath. "What do you mean the owner won't budge? This is ridiculous. You're supposed to be—" His voice trailed off, and there was a moment of silence. I didn't say anything. He didn't need me to say anything. He had his own thoughts racing, and I could almost hear him trying to figure out what was really going on. And then he asked the question that I knew was coming. "How do you know so much about this?" I paused. For just a second, I thought about telling him the truth, but I didn't. Not yet. I wanted him to stew on it a little longer. Just trust me, Dad, I said, keeping my tone light, but with a little edge. I know the owner. I know how it works. There was another silence, this one stretched out longer. I could practically hear his brain grinding through the gears, putting things together. And then he asked it, the question that would make it all click. What's the name of the company that owns the place? I could hear the uncertainty in his voice, the edge of panic creeping back in. I took another sip of my coffee, savoring the quiet for just a moment. Then I said it. Harlow Equipment and Events. There was a long, awful silence on the other end of the line. My heart didn't race. It didn't skip a beat. I didn't feel anything except a quiet satisfaction, like I was finally letting him see what he'd been too blind to notice. He finally spoke, his voice shaking, like the floor was giving out beneath him. Wait, you're the Harlow and Harlow Equipment? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence on the line spoke volumes. And then it hit. Dad lost it. His voice cracked as he shouted, You? You're the one behind the whole thing? This entire time? I didn't say a word. In the background, I could hear Mom's voice rising, her shrill tones cutting through the phone. What's going on, Tim? What's happening? Why didn't you fix it? Dad's voice dropped lower, but the anger was clear. This is a disaster, Emily. You're not fixing this. You're behind it. You're not on our side anymore. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking under me, the weight of their shock almost satisfying. But there was no victory in it. Not yet. Mom was still yelling in the background, trying to get control of the situation. But I wasn't going to fix it. Not for them. Finally, Dad came back on the line, his tone changing, this time pleading. You have to fix this, Em. You have to. We're talking about the party, about everything we planned for you. Please. I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. The audacity of it all. They didn't get it. They thought I was still the same person, the one they could push around. But I wasn't. I can't, I said, my voice steady. There's nothing to fix. You're the ones who canceled everything, remember? You said it was too much. You made this decision, not me. I let the silence hang for a moment before I spoke again, just to make it clear. And the engagement party? It's still on. Same place, same date. The only difference is you're not invited. There was no response, no frantic begging. They were done. The silence between us stretched out, thick and uncomfortable, but I wasn't going to break it. I let them scramble for something to say, something that would make it all go away, something that would pull me back into the fold. Finally, it was Mom who spoke, but her tone was completely different now, all sweetness and guilt. Emily, honey, we're just so proud of you, she said, her voice trembling just a little. We only ever wanted what was best for you. You know that, right? I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might crack. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say to her. Not after everything. Dad jumped in, trying to steer the ship away from the iceberg. He switched gears, getting all businesslike again, like he was discussing a client, not his daughter. Look, we're not saying it has to be canceled, he said. We can restructure this. I have some connections. Maybe we can scale it back, make it more practical. That way, it's still nice, but it doesn't look like you're wasting money. I let him talk. The words were familiar. Another attempt at controlling the narrative. Another attempt to make it all about what was appropriate. The sound of his voice, so polished and practiced, made my skin crawl. But I wasn't going to buy into it. I let him finish, and then I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest, itching to come out. If I were still broke, I said, my voice low and steady, would you be trying to fix this? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Not the stunned silence from earlier, but something heavier, more real. They didn't answer right away. They didn't have to. The answer was clear. The truth was, they didn't care about my happiness. They never had. Not until they saw the paycheck. Exactly, I said, cutting through the silence. I'm not some pawn you can move around when it suits you. The engagement party is still on. Same place, same date. Dad started talking again, but I didn't listen. He was saying something about logistics, about what could still be salvaged, but it was all noise to me. I cut him off. Only difference? You're not invited. The line went quiet. I wasn't sure if they were in shock or trying to figure out if they had a second chance to twist my arm. But this time, they didn't get to decide. Finally, Dad spoke. But it wasn't the same. The words were strained, almost pleading. Em, please, you don't mean that. I didn't respond right away. The air felt thick, like something was building up inside me, ready to explode, but I held it together. I wasn't going to get sucked back in. Not this time. I could hear Mom's voice in the background, softer now, trying to soothe him. Tim, let it go. And I knew then, in that moment, that I had to keep going. I wasn't about to let them back in, no matter how much they begged or how many sob stories they tried to spin. This isn't about you anymore, I said, quiet but firm. This is my life, and I'm choosing what's best for me. And what's best is not you controlling every single thing I do. They didn't answer, and they didn't need to. The conversation was over. The door was closed, and this time, I wasn't opening it. The next morning, I walked into my company's headquarters, the building's sharp glass facade reflecting the early sunlight. I hadn't even set my coffee down when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my assistant. Your parents are here. They're demanding to talk to you. I stared at the message for a moment, not even the slightest twinge of surprise. Of course they were here. Of course they thought they could walk in and convince me to cave. I didn't even feel anger, just exhaustion. They didn't get it. I immediately texted back, deny them access. Tell them to leave. I didn't want to hear another word from them. Not here. Not ever again. I set my phone down and headed straight for the back office, where my assistant caught up with me a few minutes later. They're still sitting in the lobby, she said, her voice soft but stressed. They've been waiting for 45 minutes. I told them you were unavailable, but They what? I cut her off, not needing to hear it. They said they weren't leaving until you saw them, she said, shaking her head. They're being pretty pushy. I told them security would be here soon. I looked at her for a moment, no emotion on my face, then nodded. Let them wait. I didn't care how long they stayed. They could sit in the lobby for hours, and it wouldn't change anything. A few minutes later, she came back with an update. They're being escorted out now. Security said they weren't causing any trouble, just demanding to speak with you. Good, I said, standing up to grab a file from my desk. I don't want them back here. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Ryan. Hey, Em, I didn't mean any of it. I was just mad. Can we talk, please? I stared at the screen, feeling nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just nothing. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to explain myself. Not anymore. I deleted the message. The last thing I needed was another one of his half-assed apologies. 1 minute, he's throwing insults at Eric and me, and the next, he's acting like everything's fine. But it wasn't fine. It never would be. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and calls, the weight of everything they'd said and done still lingering in the back of my mind. But I didn't let it show. By the time I left work that evening, I felt completely numb to it. When I got home, I didn't even bother checking my phone again. I had nothing left to say to them. There was no fixing this. They had made their choice, and so had I, and it was done. It wasn't long after I got home that my phone buzzed again. It was Eric this time, his text simple and confused. Your dad just called me about a family emergency. What's going on? I took a deep breath, staring at the screen for a long moment. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. I hadn't told him about any of this. I wasn't sure how he'd react, but there was no hiding it anymore. I typed out a quick response. Come over, I'll explain everything. About an hour later, Eric walked through the door, looking as confused as his text had sounded. He was in a worn-out t-shirt and jeans, like he always was when he stopped by after work. It was something comforting about his easygoing presence, but it felt different now, like I had to explain too much. I gestured for him to sit on the couch, my heart beating a little faster than usual. It's a lot, Eric, but I need you to hear me out. He nodded, his face serious but patient. I'm listening. I took a deep breath and started, giving him the bare details first, the calls, the way my family had just swooped in and made decisions about my life without even asking. When I got to the part about the venue, I could see the confusion in his eyes deepening. I felt my stomach twist, but I kept going. My family, they thought I was still broke. They didn't know about the company. They didn't know about any of it, I said, watching him closely as the pieces started to fall into place. Eric shook his head slowly. So, they trashed our plans thinking you were poor. He paused, the disbelief evident in his voice. That's insane, Emily. Why didn't you tell me? I shrugged, feeling a bitter laugh bubble up. I don't even know. I thought maybe I'd try to fix it, explain it to them, but I knew they wouldn't get it. They never have. He was quiet for a moment, digesting everything. I could see his mind turning, trying to make sense of it all. I could almost feel his disappointment, though I knew he wasn't disappointed in me. He was disappointed in them. Finally, Eric looked at me, his voice soft but serious. So, you're telling me they tried to cancel everything, screw up our future together, all because they thought you were still struggling? They didn't even take a second to understand who you are now? I nodded slowly. Yeah, that's exactly it. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling like he was trying to blow the frustration out. That's messed up, Emily. I just stared at him, not sure what to say. I had no answers for them, no apologies for anything that had happened. They had their chance. Eric let out a breath and turned to face me fully, his tone shifting again, this time with something quieter, more thoughtful. Are you still sure you want to go through with this? I didn't hesitate, not for a second. I needed this, needed him. More than ever, I said. My voice came out steady, even though the nerves in my stomach were twisting tighter. But I wasn't second-guessing it anymore. This was the choice I'd made. I wasn't going to let them take this from me, too. Eric studied me for a moment, then gave me a small, tight smile. Then we'll figure it out. And for the first time in days, I felt like I was actually breathing again. I sat down at my desk that night, the soft hum of the office around me, and let my fingers hover over the keyboard. The decision had been made, but it still felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. My family had crossed a line, and now it was time to make it official. They needed to know that things were different, that I was different. I opened a new document and started typing, the words flowing almost faster than I could keep up with. Dear Mom, Dad, and Ryan, I'm writing to inform you that, after careful consideration, I have decided that you will no longer be included in my upcoming engagement party or any future milestones in my life. While I have always valued family, I can no longer tolerate the constant undermining of my choices, my work, and the person I am becoming. Your recent actions, attempting to cancel my engagement party and making disparaging remarks about the life I've built, have made it clear to me that our values no longer align. I built my company alone, over years of hard work, dedication, and sacrifice. While you mocked me for working too many hours, I was building something real, something you chose not to understand. This letter is not just about the engagement party. It is about setting boundaries. Moving forward, I will no longer allow anyone in my life to dictate my worth or question my decisions. You have made it clear that you do not support my choices, and that is no longer something I will tolerate. I hope, in time, you come to understand the strength it took to get here. But for now, I need to take a step back. You are no longer invited to the engagement party or any future events in my life. This is my decision, and I am at peace with it. Sincerely, Emily Harlow. I read it over twice, then a third time, each pass feeling more final. Every word was deliberate, every sentence crafted carefully to make it clear that I was done. There was no room for negotiation, no space for them to backpedal. I let the silence settle in the room as I hit print, the sound of the printer whirring in the quiet office a reminder of how far I'd come. I took the freshly printed letter, slid it into an envelope, and sealed it with the company crest, the little detail that made it official. It was final now. For the first time in years, I felt fully in charge. I wasn't at the mercy of their approval anymore. I had control of my life, my future, and my business. I wasn't going to let them undermine it any longer. I picked up the letter, stared at it for a moment, and then slid it into the outgoing mail pile. It wasn't a relief exactly, more like a sense of liberation. I was done. The engagement party was everything I'd hoped for. The lakeside venue, with its shimmering water and the soft glow of lanterns hanging from the trees, looked like something straight out of a dream. The air was warm but not too hot, the kind of summer evening you can't plan, only pray for. It felt right, like I'd finally reached a place where nothing could take this moment from me. Eric and I stood together at the front of the room, surrounded by friends, mentors, and old college buddies, all gathered to celebrate us. His arm around me, his smile so wide it made my heart swell. When it was time for the toast, he stood up and raised his glass. His voice was steady, but I could see the emotion in his eyes. To love, he said, the kind of love that shows up when you least expect it, the kind that's real, not built on expectations or promises, but on trust and time. Emily and I, we found that in each other, in the most unlikely place. The room fell silent for a moment, everyone listening to him. To us, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in a long time, I felt like everything was right. There was no more doubt, no more drama, just this. This love, this life, this future. I didn't think about my parents at all during the party. It was easy not to. Everyone there was genuine, the people who saw me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. But after a few hours, I stepped away from the crowd, excusing myself to check my phone. I had a strange feeling that I wasn't done with them yet. I glanced at the screen. 30 missed calls, 17 voicemails. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't hesitate. I deleted them all without listening. The impulse to hear them, to know what they wanted, was there, but it was drowned out by something stronger, the realization that none of it mattered anymore. 6 months passed, and then, one day, a letter showed up from Dad. It was long, too long, but I skimmed through it. Apologies, regrets, and what felt like a rehearsed acknowledgement of my entrepreneurial brilliance. He wrote about how proud he was of me, how he wished things had been different. I read it once and threw it away. The words didn't feel real, not anymore. A year after that, Ryan reached out. He sent an email asking if we were hiring. I stared at the screen for a while, my finger hovering over the delete button. Then I did the one thing that felt right. I forwarded it to my assistant with a single note: do not respond. Eric and I built our life quietly, just outside the city, close to the venue but far from the noise. We found peace there, in a way that felt like home. No more family drama, no more pretending to be something we weren't. Just us and the love we'd found. My family taught me a hard lesson. Unconditional love wasn't real if it only showed up when there was something to gain, and I wasn't going to settle for that anymore.